The blood-soaked letter trembled in Zara Whitfield's hands as she stood before her father's sprawling estate, the setting sun casting long shadows across the New Mexico territory. It was 1875, and at 22 years of age, she had just become the most despised woman in all of Glenrio. "You have until dawn," her father had told her, his voice as cold as the barrel of the revolver he'd pressed into her palm just moments before. "Take what you can carry and never return." Tears blurred the carefully penned words on the parchment, the love letter that had cost her everything. The stranger who'd written it had disappeared weeks ago, vanishing like morning mist over the desert, leaving nothing but his passionate words and promises behind. Zara folded the letter and tucked it into the bodice of her dress, right above her heart. The small valise at her feet contained all she was permitted to take: a spare dress, her mother's locket, and the meager savings she'd managed to hide from her father over the years. The sound of a horse approaching made her turn. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the growing darkness, his face obscured by the wide brim of his hat. The stranger dismounted, his spurs jingling softly as his boots hit the ground. "Miss Whitfield." His voice was deep, with a hint of a southern drawl. "Name's Samuel Everton. I hear you might be in need of assistance." Zara stiffened, her hand instinctively moving to the revolver hidden in the folds of her skirt. "How do you know who I am?" The man stepped forward, and the fading light revealed a weathered face with kind eyes that contrasted sharply with the hardness of his jaw. Word travels fast in these parts, especially when Judge Whitfield decides to cast out his only daughter. "My father's affairs are none of your concern," Zara replied, lifting her chin despite the fear churning in her stomach. Samuel Everton smiled, the gesture transforming his face from intimidating to almost boyish. "Perhaps not. But I'm headed to Fort Sumner, and the road's dangerous for a lady traveling alone. I'd be honored to escort you if you've nowhere else to go." "And why would you help me, Mr. Everton? You don't know me." The cowboy adjusted his hat, his gaze steady. "Let's just say I've got my reasons for not holding much stock in what the good people of Glenrio consider proper judgment." Zara hesitated, weighing her options. Stay and face her father's wrath, or leave with this stranger who might be her only chance at survival in the unforgiving territory. "I have relatives in Santa Fe," she lied, clutching her valise tighter. Samuel nodded, seemingly understanding her caution. "Fort Sumner's on the way. I'll see you safely that far at least." As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, Zara made her decision. She picked up her valise and approached the cowboy's horse. "I accept your offer, Mr. Everton, but know this: I'm not afraid to use this." She patted the hidden revolver. Samuel's laughter was unexpected, a warm sound that somehow eased the tension in her shoulders. "I wouldn't expect anything less from Judge Whitfield's daughter. And please, call me Sam." He helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her, his presence solid and reassuring at her back. As they rode away from the only home she'd ever known, Zara couldn't help but wonder if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or if perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something new. The night air was crisp as they rode across the New Mexico territory, the vastness of the landscape shrouded in darkness save for the silver glow of moonlight. Zara sat rigidly in front of Samuel, acutely aware of his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. "We'll make camp soon," he said, his voice close to her ear. "There's a creek about an hour's ride from here, water for the horse and shelter from the wind." Zara nodded, not trusting her voice. The events of the day had left her exhausted, her mind still reeling from how quickly her life had unraveled. "You want to talk about it?" Samuel asked after several minutes of silence. "About what, Mr. Everton?" Sam, he corrected gently. And I meant about why Judge Whitfield would disown his only daughter. Must have been something serious. Zara's hand instinctively went to the letter hidden in her dress. I made the mistake of falling in love with a man my father didn't approve of. That seems harsh, even for the judge. He wasn't just any man, Zara admitted quietly. He was a drifter passing through town. Father called him a good-for-nothing vagabond with silver on his tongue and emptiness in his pockets. Samuel was silent for a moment. And was he? A good-for-nothing, I mean. Zara sighed, the memory of the stranger's face appearing in her mind, his dark eyes, the way they'd crinkled when he smiled, the gentle touch of his hand against her cheek. His name was Thomas. He was educated, kind. He wrote me beautiful letters when Father forbade him from seeing me. And where is this Thomas now? The pain in her chest intensified. Gone. He left town 3 weeks ago, said he had business to attend to and would return for me, but he never did. They reached the creek just as Samuel had predicted, and he helped her dismount before tending to his horse. Zara watched him work, his movements efficient and practiced. You've been on the trail a long time, she observed. Samuel nodded, not looking up from unsaddling the horse. Most of my life. Started riding with cattle drives when I was 16, picked up odd jobs here and there ever since. And what brings you to Glenrio? It's hardly a destination for most travelers. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Had some business with a man there. Turned out he wasn't around anymore. Zara helped him gather wood for a small fire, grateful for the distraction of physical labor. As the flames took hold, casting warm light over their small camp, she found herself studying her unlikely companion. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His nose had clearly been broken at least once, and a thin scar ran along his jawline, but there was something compelling about his face, a quiet strength in his features. You should get some rest, Samuel said, interrupting her thoughts. We've got a long ride ahead tomorrow. Zara wrapped herself in the blanket he'd offered and lay down near the fire, using her valise as a pillow. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She was alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, cast out by her family, with nowhere to truly go. Mr. Everton, Sam, she said softly, unsure if he was still awake. Yes. Why are you really helping me? He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then, everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Whitfield, even those who love unwisely. His words followed her into an uneasy sleep, where she dreamed of Thomas's disappearance and her father's cold eyes as he'd ordered her to leave. When dawn broke, Zara awoke to find Samuel already up, brewing coffee over a fresh fire. He handed her a tin cup without a word, and she accepted it gratefully, the hot liquid warming her from the inside. We should reach Fort Sumner by tomorrow evening if we keep a good pace, he said, studying a worn map. And then Samuel looked up at her. That depends on you, Miss Whitfield. Where do you really want to go? The direct question caught her off guard. I told you I have relatives in Santa Fe. No, you don't. His voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. Your father's people are all back east, and your mother was an only child. Judge Whitfield made sure everyone knew his daughter had no family to run to if she ever disobeyed him. Zara's hand tightened around the cup. You seem to know a lot about me and my family, Mr. Everton. It's my business to know things about the people I deal with. And what exactly is your business? Samuel folded the map and tucked it into his saddlebag. Right now, it's getting you safely to Fort Sumner. They rode in tense silence for most of the morning, the vast New Mexico landscape stretching endlessly around them. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Zara was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Samuel had lent her. Around midday, They stopped to rest the horse and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack. Samuel moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to life on the trail, and Zara found herself wondering about his past. "How did you get that scar?" she asked, gesturing to the thin line along his jaw. He touched it absently as if he'd forgotten it was there. "Bar fight in Dodge City. Man accused me of cheating at cards." "Were you?" The question drew a genuine laugh from him. "No, madam, I don't need to cheat to win." "So you're a gambler?" "Among other things." Samuel took a drink from his canteen. "But mostly I look for people." "You're a bounty hunter," Zara tensed. "No, nothing like that. More of a finder. People hire me to locate things or persons they've lost." Understanding dawned on Zara. "Is that why you were in Glenrio?" "You were looking for someone." Samuel's eyes met hers, unreadable. "Yes." "Who?" He didn't answer immediately, seeming to weigh his words. "A man who wrote some letters, important letters." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "Thomas." "I don't know his real name." "My client only knew him by the name he signed on his correspondences." With trembling fingers, Zara reached into her bodice and withdrew the letter that had cost her everything. Was it this man? Samuel took the letter carefully, his expression giving nothing away as he examined the signature at the bottom. "Forever yours, JT." "JT," Samuel said quietly. "James Thomas." "Yes, this is his handwriting." Zara felt lightheaded, a mixture of hope and fear washing over her. "You were looking for him. Is he in trouble?" He's alive as far as I know," Samuel assured her quickly. "But he's a difficult man to pin down. Been chasing his trail for almost 2 months now." "Who hired you to find him?" Samuel hesitated. "I can't reveal that. Client confidentiality." Zara stood abruptly, anger flaring. "If you know something about the man I love, you need to tell me. I've lost everything because of him." "Miss Whitfield, no. I deserve to know the truth. Is he married? Is that why he disappeared? Was some heartbroken wife looking to find her wandering husband?" Samuel rose to his feet, his face serious. "It's not like that, but I can't tell you more, not yet. Please trust me." "Trust you? I don't even know you." The frustration of the past weeks boiled over, and Zara found herself close to tears. Samuel stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "I give you my word, I'm not trying to hurt you or Thomas. But this is bigger than just the two of you, and I need to be careful about what I reveal and when." Something in his tone made Zara pause. There was an urgency there, a hint of something dangerous beneath the surface. "Is he in danger?" she asked, her anger giving way to concern. Samuel's silence was answer enough. "Then I'm coming with you to find him," Zara declared. "And don't try to talk me out of it. I've already lost everything to love him. I might as well see it through." For a long moment Samuel studied her, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. "Then I guess we'd better get moving. Our man has quite a head start." They packed up camp quickly and resumed their journey, but now the silence between them was charged with a new energy. Zara's mind raced with questions, but she forced herself to be patient. Samuel Everton clearly had his reasons for secrecy, and pushing him too hard might cause him to shut down completely. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Samuel guided his horse off the main trail and into a small grove of cottonwoods. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, dismounting and helping Zara down. "There's a settlement about 5 miles ahead, but I'd prefer to avoid it." "Why?" Zara asked, stretching her sore muscles. "The less people who see us traveling together, the better. Your father's influence reaches far, and I don't want anyone reporting back to him that I've taken his daughter." The thought of her father sent a chill through Zara despite the warm evening. "He wouldn't come after me. He made it clear I'm dead to him now." Samuel began unloading their supplies. Men like Judge Whitfield care more about appearances than anything else. Having his daughter run off with a stranger would damage his reputation. He might come looking for you just to save face. I didn't run off with a stranger, Zara protested. I was cast out for loving one. Samuel paused, meeting her gaze directly. Then I'm glad to be him. The simple statement hung in the air between them, its meaning unclear. Before Zara could respond, a twig snapped in the underbrush beyond their camp. Samuel's hand flew to his holstered revolver as he stepped protectively in front of Zara. Who's there? Show yourself. After a tense moment, a young boy emerged from the trees, his hands raised. He couldn't have been more than 12, with a dirt-smudged face and clothes that hung too loosely on his thin frame. Don't shoot, mister. I ain't meaning no harm. Samuel relaxed slightly but kept his hand near his weapon. What are you doing sneaking around our camp, boy? Wasn't sneaking, the boy protested. Was hunting and saw your fire, thought maybe you might spare some food. His eyes darted hopefully to their saddlebags. Zara stepped forward. Are you alone? Where are your parents? The boy's chin jutted out defiantly. Don't got none. Take care of myself just fine. Samuel and Zara exchanged a look. What's your name? Samuel asked, his tone gentler now. Timothy, but everyone calls me Tim. Well, Tim, Samuel said, gesturing to their small campfire, we were just about to have dinner. There's enough to share if you'd like to join us. The boy's face lit up, but he tried to maintain his tough facade. I could hunt my own food, you know. Got a slingshot that brings down rabbits sometimes. I'm sure you're quite the hunter, Zara said kindly, but we'd appreciate the company. As they shared their modest meal, Tim gradually opened up. He'd been orphaned 2 years ago when influenza swept through the nearby settlement of Piedras Negras. With no relatives to take him in, he'd been surviving on odd jobs and his own wits ever since. Where are you headed? He asked, his mouth full of beans. Fort Sumner for now, Samuel replied, and you should slow down before you choke. Tim swallowed with effort. What's in Fort Sumner? Information, hopefully, Samuel said vaguely. We're looking for someone. The boy's eyes widened with interest. A wanted man. Are you bounty hunters? Zara couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. No, just trying to find an old friend. I know lots of people, Tim offered eagerly. I travel all over. Maybe I seen him. Samuel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a sketch. It showed a handsome man with dark hair and intense eyes, a man Zara recognized immediately. Thomas, she whispered, reaching for the drawing. You know him? Tim asked, watching her reaction carefully. Yes, Zara replied, her fingers tracing the lines of the familiar face. He's the man the friend we're looking for. Tim studied the sketch when Samuel handed it to him. Yeah, I seen him before. In Piedras Negras about 3 weeks back. He was asking questions about the old silver mine. Samuel straightened, suddenly alert. What kind of questions? About who owned it now, how to get in, that sort of thing. Tim shrugged. People said he was crazy. That mine's been abandoned since the cave-in killed all those workers last year. Zara looked at Samuel, whose expression had grown grim. What would Thomas want with an abandoned silver mine? I don't know, Samuel replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. But it gives us a place to start looking. That night, after Tim had fallen asleep by the fire, Zara approached Samuel, who was keeping watch at the edge of their camp. You're not telling me everything, she said quietly. What's really going on with Thomas? Samuel sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. Miss Whitfield, Zara, she corrected. If we're going to be traveling together, you might as well use my given name. Zara, he conceded. There are things about Thomas, or whatever his real name is, that you don't know. Things that might change how you feel about him. Such as? Samuel looked at her for a long moment. The man you know as Thomas has gone by at least 3 different names in the last year. He's been in and out of towns across the territory, always charming, always leaving suddenly, and always after getting close to influential families. Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. You're saying he targeted me. Because of my father. I'm saying it's a pattern. One that my client has been tracking for some time. And who exactly is this mysterious client? Samuel ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. Someone who believes Thomas may be involved in something dangerous. Something that goes beyond just breaking hearts and stealing family heirlooms. The accusation stung, but Zara forced herself to consider it objectively. He never asked me for anything of value, and he left before. She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. Before you were cast out, Samuel completed for her. Yes, that's the part that doesn't fit his usual pattern. Typically, he disappears with valuables, not empty-handed. Zara pulled Thomas's letter from her bodice again, rereading the passionate words by the moonlight. In his last letter, he mentioned coming back for me, that we would start a new life together away from my father's influence. Samuel's expression softened. May I? He asked, holding out his hand for the letter. Reluctantly, Zara handed it over. Samuel read it carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. This line here, he said, pointing to a passage. When next we meet, it will be in a place where silver flows like water and our future will be secured forever. He's talking about the mine. But why would he want me to meet him at an abandoned silver mine? Samuel folded the letter and returned it to her. That's what we need to find out. But I think we should be prepared for the possibility that Thomas isn't the man you believed him to be. Zara took the letter back, holding it tightly. Or perhaps he's exactly who I thought, and there's an explanation for all of this. Samuel didn't argue, but his silence spoke volumes. As Zara returned to her bedroll, she felt the weight of doubt pressing down on her for the first time. What if the man she'd sacrificed everything for wasn't worthy of that sacrifice? What if the love she'd fought for was based on lies? Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of Thomas's face shifting and changing, becoming unrecognizable even as he reached for her. When she woke at dawn, Zara had made a decision. She would find Thomas and hear the truth from his own lips, whatever that truth might be. Tim was still asleep, curled tightly around himself like a small animal. Samuel was already up, saddling his horse and preparing for the day's journey. I want to go to the silver mine, Zara announced as she approached him. Samuel paused in his work. I thought we agreed on Fort Sumner first. That was before we knew about the mine. If Thomas left me a clue in his letter, then that's where he expects me to go. It could be dangerous, Samuel warned. Abandoned mines are unstable, and if Thomas is involved in something illegal. Then I need to know, Zara insisted. I've lost everything for him, Samuel. My family, my home, my reputation. I deserve answers. Samuel studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, the mine it is, but we do this carefully, understand, no rushing in. Agreed. A small voice interrupted them. Can I come too? They turned to find Tim sitting up, rubbing sleep from his eyes but clearly alert enough to have been listening. This isn't an adventure, Tim, Samuel said kindly but firmly. We're dealing with a potentially dangerous situation. I know the mine better than anyone, Tim argued. Been in and out of there lots of times. The main shaft collapsed, but there are other ways in, secret ways. Zara and Samuel exchanged looks. How do you know these secret ways? Zara asked. Tim puffed up with pride. Some of the Mexican workers who survived the cave-in showed me. They still go back sometimes, looking for silver scraps to sell. Samuel considered this information. That could be useful, but it's still too dangerous for a boy. I ain't just a boy, Tim protested. I've been taking care of myself for years, and I can shoot." He pulled a small revolver from inside his tattered jacket. Samuel's eyebrows shot up. "Where did you get that?" "Found it," Tim said evasively. "Point is, I can help, and maybe you could help me too." "How's that?" Samuel asked. Tim looked down, suddenly shy. "Been thinking about heading to California. Heard there's work there for everyone, even kids, but it's a long journey alone." Zara's heart softened. Despite his tough exterior, Tim was still a child in need of protection and guidance. "We can't promise California, but perhaps we can help you find somewhere safe to stay after this is over." Tim brightened. "So I can come," Samuel sighed, clearly outvoted. "You stay close and do exactly as I say. At the first sign of trouble you run and hide. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Tim scrambled to his feet, eagerly helping to break camp. As they prepared to leave, Samuel pulled Zara aside. "We need to be ready for what we might find," he said quietly. "If Thomas is involved in something illegal at that mine, he may not be alone. What do you think he's doing there?" Samuel's expression grew serious. "There have been rumors of counterfeiters operating in the territory, using silver from the old mines to make fake coins and currency." The implication hit Zara like a physical blow. "You think Thomas is a counterfeiter?" "I don't know. But the pattern fits: gaining access to influential homes, moving frequently, showing interest in abandoned silver mines. My client believes he might be part of a larger operation." "Who exactly is this client of yours?" Zara demanded, frustration building. "If you know so much about Thomas, why not just tell me everything?" Samuel glanced toward Tim, making sure the boy was out of earshot. "Because my client is a United States Marshal, and I'm working as his informant to track down a counterfeiting ring that's been flooding the territory with fake currency for months." The revelation left Zara speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. "And you believe Thomas is part of this ring?" "I believe he might be. That's why I was in Glen Rio following his trail. And when you found me instead," Samuel's eyes softened. "I saw an opportunity to learn more, but I didn't expect." "Didn't expect what?" "I didn't expect you to be genuine. In my experience, the women associated with men like Thomas are usually accomplices." The accusation stung, but Zara could understand his suspicion. "Well, now you know I'm just a fool who fell in love with a stranger." Samuel stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Not a fool. Just someone who saw the good in a person and chose to believe in it. There's no shame in that." Before Zara could respond, Tim called out from where he was waiting with the horse. "Are we going or what? It's a long ride to Piedras Negras." Samuel helped Zara mount, then swung up behind her with Tim seated in front, and they set off toward the abandoned silver mine, each lost in their own thoughts about what they might find there. The journey to Piedras Negras took the better part of the day, with Tim chattering excitedly about the small settlement and its history. According to the boy, the town had once been prosperous due to the nearby silver mine, but after the cave-in that killed 20 miners, many residents had packed up and left. "Only about 50 people still live there," Tim explained as they rode. "Mostly old-timers who have nowhere else to go, and a few Mexican families who work the smaller claims around the area." "And the mine itself?" Samuel asked. "Is it guarded?" Tim shook his head. "Nah, the company that owned it went bankrupt after the accident. There's signs warning people to stay out, but nobody enforces it. The entrance is all caved in anyway." "But you mentioned other ways in," Zara reminded him. "Yeah, there's ventilation shafts and some smaller tunnels the original miners dug. They're not on any maps, but the Mexican workers know them. That's how they get in to look for leftover silver." As they crested a hill, Piedras Negras came into view, a collection of weathered buildings nestled in a dusty valley. On the far side of the settlement, they could see the remains of the mine works, the wooden framework of the main shaft standing like a skeleton against the landscape. "We should approach carefully," Samuel advised. "If there is counterfeiting activity happening there, they'll have lookouts." They made camp in a sheltered arroyo about a mile from town, deciding to wait for nightfall before investigating further. As the sun began to set, Samuel took out his spyglass and studied the mine entrance from their vantage point. "I don't see any movement," he reported. "But that doesn't mean no one's there." "We should go into town first," Tim suggested. "I know a man who might have information. Old Manuel worked the mine for years before the accident. He knows every tunnel and shaft." Samuel considered this. "All right, but we need to be discreet." "Zara, it might be best if you stay here." "Absolutely not," she replied firmly. "I've come this far to find answers, and I'm not going to wait in the shadows while you two go looking for them." Samuel seemed about to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him of her determination. "Fine, but stay close and follow my lead. If Thomas is in town and sees you, it could complicate things." They waited until dusk before approaching Piedras Negras, leading the horse on foot to avoid drawing attention. The settlement was quiet, with only a few lamps glowing in windows and the sounds of a piano drifting from what appeared to be a small saloon. "Manuel usually takes his evening meal at the cantina," Tim whispered, pointing to a modest adobe building at the edge of town. "He likes the corner table where he can watch the door." They tied the horse at a hitching post and entered the dimly lit cantina. The room fell momentarily silent as the patrons, mostly Mexican workers, and a few weathered Anglo miners took note of the newcomers. Samuel nodded politely, and the low conversation gradually resumed. Tim scanned the room and pointed discreetly to an elderly Mexican man seated alone in the corner. "That's him." Samuel led them to the table, where the old man regarded them with rheumy but alert eyes. "Buenas noches," Samuel greeted him in passable Spanish. "May we join you?" Manuel studied them briefly before nodding. "The boy I know," he said in heavily accented English. "You too, I do not." "They're friends, Manuel," Tim assured him. "They're looking for information about the mine." The old man's expression grew wary. "The mine is dead. Nothing there but ghosts and bad memories." Samuel leaned forward, his voice low. "We believe someone might be using it for purposes other than mining. A man about my height, dark hair, well-spoken." He described Thomas as best he could from the sketch and Zara's descriptions. Manuel's eyes flickered with recognition. "This man, he came asking questions, yes. Maybe 3 weeks ago. Wanted to know about the lower levels, the parts of the mine that did not collapse." Zara's heart quickened. "Did he say why he was interested?" The old miner studied her face carefully. "He said he was a government inspector checking the mine's safety, but his hands—" Manuel held up his own gnarled, work-hardened hands. "They were not the hands of a man who knows mining." "Did he offer you money for information?" Samuel asked. Manuel nodded slowly. $10 in silver to show him the back entrance. Good money." He paused, a shadow crossing his face. But there was something not right. The questions he asked not about safety, but about how to move heavy equipment in without being seen. Zara felt her hope dimming with each word. It was becoming harder to deny that Thomas's interest in the mine might be exactly what Samuel suspected. "Have you seen anyone coming or going from the mine since then?" Samuel pressed. "At night sometimes," Manuel confirmed. "Wagons with supplies, men with guns. They use the old supply road that runs behind the ridge." He pointed eastward. 3 nights ago there was much activity. More wagons than usual. Samuel and Zara exchanged glances. "Is there a way we could observe the mine without being seen?" Samuel asked. Manuel hesitated, then leaned in closer. Why do you want to know these things? Are you lawmen? We're looking for the truth, Zara answered before Samuel could speak. This man, the one asking questions, he made promises to me. I need to know if they were lies. Something in her tone must have resonated with the old miner. His weathered face softened. There is a place. A ledge above the east tunnel where we used to take our midday meals. You can see the back entrance from there, but they cannot see you. He took a scrap of paper from his pocket and sketched a crude map, marking the location of the hidden observation point and the back entrance to the mine. Gracias, Samuel said, tucking the map away and sliding a coin across the table. We appreciate your help. Manuel pushed the coin back. No. If men are using the mine for bad purposes, I want them gone. It is a place of death already. It should be left in peace. As they rose to leave, the old miner caught Zara's sleeve. Señorita, be careful. Men who hide in dark places have dark hearts. Outside the cantina, they regrouped in the shadows between buildings. We should check out the observation point tonight, Samuel suggested. If there's activity at the mine, we need to know what we're dealing with before we get any closer. Tim bounced on his toes, excited by the prospect of adventure. I can lead you there. It's not far, but the path is tricky in the dark. They retrieved their horse and circled around the settlement, following Manuel's crude map and Tim's surprisingly confident guidance. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to navigate the rocky terrain as they approached the abandoned mine from the east. After about 40 minutes of careful progress, Tim pointed to a narrow ledge jutting out from the hillside above what appeared to be a secondary entrance to the mine. That's it, he whispered. Manuel's lookout spot. Samuel helped Zara negotiate the steep path up to the ledge, while Tim scrambled ahead with the agility of youth. Once positioned, they had a clear view of a small clearing below, where the remains of an old supply shed stood near what looked like a boarded-up tunnel entrance. Now we wait, Samuel murmured, settling into a comfortable position. They didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, the distant sound of wagon wheels broke the night's silence. Samuel motioned for them to stay low as a horse-drawn wagon appeared, moving slowly along the old supply road toward the mine entrance. 2 men rode alongside the wagon, rifles clearly visible across their laps. When they reached the boarded-up entrance, one dismounted and removed several of the boards, revealing a passage large enough for the wagon to enter. They're definitely using it for something, Samuel whispered. As the wagon was guided into the tunnel, Zara caught a glimpse of its contents in the moonlight: wooden crates and what appeared to be machinery parts. Equipment for counterfeiting. She wondered aloud, her voice barely audible. Before Samuel could respond, Tim tugged urgently at his sleeve. "There's someone else," the boy hissed, pointing to a figure on horseback approaching from the direction of the town. The rider came into view, and Zara felt her breath catch in her throat. Even in the dim moonlight, she would recognize that silhouette anywhere. "Thomas," she whispered, instinctively starting to rise. Samuel's hand shot out, gripping her arm firmly. "Wait," he cautioned. "We need to see what he does." They watched as Thomas dismounted and exchanged words with the armed men. Though they couldn't hear the conversation, the familiar way they interacted suggested this wasn't their first meeting. After a brief discussion, Thomas followed the men into the mine, leading his horse behind him. When they had disappeared from view, Zara turned to Samuel, her expression a mixture of heartbreak and determination. "I need to speak with him." "That would be dangerous," Samuel warned. "We don't know how many men are in there or what exactly they're doing." "I don't care. I've come all this way for answers, and I'm going to get them." Zara's voice was steady despite the turmoil inside her. "If you won't help me, I'll find a way myself." Samuel studied her face in the moonlight, then sighed. We'll need a plan. We can't just walk in there. I might know a way, Tim offered. There's another entrance, more of a crack in the rock really, that leads to the upper galleries. The Mexican workers used it after the cave-in to retrieve their tools. It comes out near where they used to sort the ore. Samuel considered this. Could we get in undetected that way? Tim nodded enthusiastically. Sure, it's tight in spots, but we can make it, and nobody ever watches it. It's too small for moving equipment through. After some discussion, they formulated a plan. They would use Tim's secret entrance to infiltrate the mine at dawn, when the night workers would be tired and those working day shifts might not have arrived yet. The boy would guide them in and then remain hidden while Samuel and Zara investigated further. As they made their way back to their camp to rest before the morning's mission, Zara found herself walking alongside Samuel, slightly apart from Tim, who led the way. "What will you do if he is involved in counterfeiting?" Samuel asked quietly. Zara had been asking herself the same question since seeing Thomas at the mine entrance. "I don't know," she admitted. "I want to believe there's an explanation, but the evidence is mounting," Samuel finished for her. "Yes." Zara took a deep breath. "If he is a criminal, then I've been a fool, but at least I'll know the truth and I can begin to rebuild my life without illusions." Samuel was silent for a moment. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're a fool. Trusting someone enough to love them takes courage, even when that trust is misplaced, especially then." His voice was soft in the darkness. "It's easy to trust when you've never been given reason to doubt. The real test comes afterward." They reached their camp and settled in for a few hours of rest, though Zara doubted she would sleep. Her mind was too full of questions and fears about what morning would bring. As she lay awake, staring at the stars above, she found herself wondering about Samuel. For a man who claimed to be merely an informant for a U.S. Marshal, he seemed remarkably skilled in tracking and surveillance. And despite his initial suspicions about her, he had shown her nothing but respect and consideration. There was more to Samuel Everton than met the eye, Zara realized. Just as there might be more to Thomas's involvement with the mine than simple criminality. Tomorrow, she hoped, would bring clarity to both mysteries. Dawn broke with a pale, rose-gold light that gradually illuminated the rugged landscape around Piedras Negras. Zara, Samuel, and Tim approached the abandoned mine from the north, using the cover of scrub brush and boulders to mask their approach. Tim led them to what appeared to be a natural fissure in the rocky hillside, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. "This is it," the boy whispered, pushing aside a tangle of weeds. "The crack widens about 10 feet in. We can stand up after that." Samuel eyed the narrow opening with skepticism. "You're sure this leads into the mine workings?" Tim nodded confidently. "Positive. I've used it loads of times. Mexican workers showed it to me when I helped them carry out some tools after the cave-in." "I'll go first," Samuel decided, checking that his revolver was secure in its holster. "Then Zara and Tim, you follow last since you know the way." The passage was as tight as Tim had warned, barely wide enough for Samuel's broad shoulders. They had to proceed single file, feeling their way through the darkness, until, as promised, the crack widened into a roughly hewn tunnel. The miners expanded a natural fissure, Tim explained in a hushed voice. Used it as an emergency exit before the main shaft was completed. The air grew cooler and heavy with mineral scents as they ventured deeper. Occasional wooden support beams appeared, confirming they were now in the man-made portions of the mine. Tim guided them through a confusing maze of tunnels, some so low they had to crouch, others wide enough for mining carts. "We're getting close to the sorting room," Tim whispered after about 15 minutes of careful progress. That's where they separated the valuable ore from the waste rock. It connects to the main shaft. As they approached, Samuel held up a hand, signaling them to stop. A faint glow of light was visible ahead, and the distant sound of voices and machinery echoed through the tunnels. "Wait here," he instructed. "I'll take a look." Zara gripped his arm. "We came together. I'm coming with you." After a brief hesitation, Samuel nodded. "Tim, you stay hidden. If we're not back in an hour, make your way out and get help." The boy looked disappointed but agreed, finding a niche between some fallen rocks where he could remain concealed. Samuel and Zara crept forward toward the light source. The tunnel opened into a large chamber with high ceilings supported by thick wooden beams. What had once been the mine's sorting room had been transformed into something entirely different. Several tables were arranged in the center, where men worked at what appeared to be printing presses. Stacks of paper currency were being sorted and bundled, while at another station, men operated machinery that Zara recognized as coin stamping equipment. The walls were lined with crates, some open to reveal bars of silver that glinted in the lamplight. "A full counterfeiting operation," Samuel whispered. "Just as suspected." Zara scanned the room, looking for Thomas. She spotted him near the far wall, deep in conversation with a heavy-set man who appeared to be in charge. Thomas was gesturing animatedly, pointing to some papers spread out on a makeshift desk. "There he is," she breathed, unconsciously stepping forward. Samuel pulled her back into the shadows. "Careful. There are at least 10 men in there, all armed." "I need to speak with him," Zara insisted. "I need to know why." Before Samuel could respond, the conversation across the room grew heated. Thomas's voice rose, becoming audible to them for the first time. "That wasn't our agreement, Blackwell. You promised me a fair cut for bringing the plates and equipment." The heavy-set man, Blackwell, laughed dismissively. "Agreements change, Thomas, or whatever your real name is this week. You're lucky I'm giving you anything after that mess in Santa Fe." "I got you what you wanted," Thomas argued. "Without me, you'd still be making crude forgeries that any bank teller could spot. And without me, you'd still be seducing spinsters for their silver spoons," Blackwell retorted. "Don't push your luck, boy. Men who get greedy in my operation tend to have unfortunate accidents." He gestured meaningfully toward the deeper tunnels of the mine. Zara felt sick. The conversation confirmed her worst fears. Thomas was indeed part of the counterfeiting ring, and apparently had a history of deceiving women for gain. A movement at the entrance to the sorting room caught her attention. 3 men entered, escorting a fourth whose hands were bound. With a jolt of recognition, Zara realized the prisoner was wearing the distinctive badge of a U.S. Marshal. "Look what we found snooping around the south entrance," one of the men announced, shoving the marshal forward. "Says he's been tracking us for months." Blackwell approached the captive lawman, studying him with cold eyes. "Marshal Jenkins, I was wondering when you'd find us." The marshal straightened despite his bonds. "You've made a mistake, Blackwell. My men know where I am. They'll be here by nightfall." "I doubt that," Blackwell replied with a cruel smile. "Especially since the only man who knew your destination met with an unfortunate accident outside of Glenrio 3 days ago." Samuel stiffened beside Zara, his hand moving to his revolver. "We need to help him," he whispered urgently. "And we need to get out of here and bring back reinforcements." Zara nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on Thomas, who was watching the confrontation with a troubled expression. Despite everything she'd heard, she couldn't help noticing that he seemed uncomfortable with the marshal's capture. "What about him?" she asked, nodding toward Thomas. Samuel's jaw tightened. He made his choice. "Right now, we need to focus on getting out alive and saving the marshal." Before they could retreat, however, a shout came from behind them. Intruders. They whirled to find one of Blackwell's men standing at the entrance to their tunnel, gun drawn. In the confusion, they hadn't noticed him checking the perimeter. "Run!" Samuel shouted, drawing his revolver and firing a shot that sent the man diving for cover. Chaos erupted in the sorting room. Men scrambled for weapons while Blackwell shouted orders. Samuel grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her back down the tunnel, but two armed men were already in pursuit. "This way!" Zara cried, remembering a fork in the passage they had passed earlier. They darted down a narrow side tunnel, the sound of pursuit close behind them. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering the wooden support beam beside Zara's head. Samuel returned fire and they heard a cry of pain, but the second man continued the chase. The tunnel began to slope upward, becoming steeper and narrower. Zara's lungs burned as they climbed, but fear drove her forward. Behind them, their pursuer was gaining ground. "There's a chamber ahead," Samuel gasped. "We can make a stand there." They emerged into a small natural cavern with multiple tunnel openings branching off in different directions. Samuel positioned Zara behind a large boulder and took up a defensive position, his revolver trained on the tunnel they had just exited. Seconds later, their pursuer appeared, gun raised. Samuel fired, and the man fell with a grunt. But the sound of more voices echoed up from below, indicating that others were not far behind. "We need to keep moving," Samuel urged. "They'll have this place surrounded soon." As they were about to choose another tunnel, a familiar figure stepped out from one of the openings, revolver pointed directly at them. Thomas. His face registered shock as he recognized Zara. "What in God's name are you doing here?" Before she could respond, Samuel aimed his weapon at Thomas's chest. "Drop the gun." Thomas hesitated, his eyes darting between Samuel and Zara. "You don't understand what's happening here." "I understand enough," Zara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I heard you with Blackwell. I know what you're involved in." "Zara, please." Thomas took a step forward, but Samuel cocked his revolver. "Don't move," Samuel warned. "Drop the gun or I'll drop you." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Thomas slowly lowered his weapon and placed it on the ground. "You're making a mistake," he said. "I'm not who you think I am." "Save it," Samuel replied coldly. "We heard enough to know exactly who you are, a con man and a counterfeiter who preys on vulnerable women." To Zara's surprise, Thomas laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Is that what you think? That I seduced Zara as part of some scheme?" He shook his head. "You couldn't be more wrong." "Then explain," Zara demanded, stepping out from behind the boulder. "Explain why you left me without a word, why you're here with these criminals, why you lied about everything." Thomas's expression softened as he looked at her. "I didn't lie about loving you, Zara. That was real. Everything else." He sighed. "It's complicated." "We don't have time for this," Samuel interrupted, the sound of pursuit growing louder. "We need to move." "I can help you," Thomas offered quickly. "I know another way out, a ventilation shaft that leads to the surface about half a mile from the main entrance. Blackwell's men won't know to look there." Samuel regarded him skeptically. "Why would you help us?" "Because despite what you think, I'm not one of them." Thomas reached slowly into his jacket and withdrew a folded document. "My name isn't Thomas. It's Agent James Taylor, United States Secret Service. I've been undercover in Blackwell's operation for 6 months." Zara stared at the badge and identification papers he revealed, her mind struggling to process this new information. Samuel didn't lower his gun. "Prove it." "The marshal they captured, Jenkins, he's my contact. We've been building a case against Blackwell's counterfeiting ring. It's one of the largest in the Western Territories." "If you're a federal agent, why were you in Glenrio?" Zara asked, still trying to reconcile this revelation with the man she thought she knew. Thomas, or rather, James looked pained. Initially, I was following a lead that Judge Whitfield might be involved in laundering Blackwell's counterfeit currency through his bank holdings. I got close to you to gain access to your father's circle. He paused, his voice softening. But what happened between us was never part of the plan, Zara. I fell in love with you and it compromised my mission. That's why I left to protect you and to try to salvage the operation. More voices echoed from the tunnels below, closer now. We need to decide, Samuel said tersely. Trust him or take our chances on our own. Zara studied James's face, the face of a man she'd thought she knew, then lost, and now didn't recognize at all. Yet something in his eyes, a desperate sincerity, made her decision for her. Show us this ventilation shaft, she said. James nodded and quickly retrieved his gun, but instead of threatening them, he handed it to Samuel. As a show of good faith, he explained. But we need to hurry, and we need to get Marshal Jenkins out too. The boy, Zara remembered suddenly. Tim is still hidden near the sorting room. I know another way to that area, James assured her. We can get him first, then circle back for Jenkins. But we need to move now. With no better options, they followed James through a labyrinth of tunnels, his confident navigation suggesting he knew the mine's layout intimately. The sounds of pursuit faded as they took a circuitous route that seemed to double back on itself at times. How do you know these tunnels so well? Samuel asked suspiciously. I've been mapping them for weeks, James replied. Needed to know escape routes in case my cover was blown. Which it apparently has been now. They reached a narrow passage that James said would lead them back to where Tim was hiding. As they crept forward, Zara found herself next to James, while Samuel took the rear position. Why didn't you tell me the truth? She whispered. In your letters, you could have given me some hint. James looked at her sadly. I couldn't risk it, if your father really was involved and found the letters. And then, when I realized how deep my feelings for you had become, I knew I had to leave. An agent can't have attachments, they're vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So you just disappeared. I thought it was better that way, a clean break. He hesitated. I never imagined your father would cast you out. I heard about it while I was in Santa Fe, but by then I was too deep in the operation to abandon it, even for you. I'm sorry, Zara. More than you can know. Before she could respond, they reached the area near the sorting room. Tim was still hidden exactly where they'd left him, wide-eyed but unharmed. You came back, the boy whispered excitedly. I heard shooting. We're getting out of here, Samuel told him, but first we need to rescue someone. James outlined his plan quickly. They would create a diversion at the far side of the mine while Samuel freed Jenkins during the confusion. James knew the guard rotations and believed they could time it to minimize resistance. The plan was risky but feasible. Using some blasting powder James had stashed earlier as part of his contingency planning, they set up a small explosive charge in an abandoned tunnel far from their escape route. When the explosion rocked the mine, sending men running to investigate, Samuel moved swiftly to overpower the single guard left with Jenkins. Within minutes, they had freed the marshal and were heading toward the ventilation shaft James had described. Marshal Jenkins was initially suspicious of James's involvement, but a few quietly exchanged code phrases seemed to confirm his identity as a fellow agent. Blackwell suspected someone in his operation was a mole, Jenkins explained as they hurried through the tunnels. That's why I came in person to extract Taylor before his cover was blown. Looks like you both needed extracting, Samuel remarked dryly. The ventilation shaft was, as James had described, a narrow but navigable passage that angled steeply upward toward the surface. Climbing was difficult, especially for Jenkins, who had been roughed up by his captors, but the promise of freedom drove them onward. They emerged into the bright morning sunlight about half a mile from the main mine entrance, hidden from view by a ridge of rock. The fresh air had never felt so sweet to Zara as she gulped it into her lungs. "We need to get to town," Jenkins said urgently. "I have men stationed in Las Vegas who can be here by nightfall. We'll raid the mine and arrest Blackwell and his entire operation." "What about us?" Tim asked, looking from face to face. Jenkins regarded the boy thoughtfully. "You've all witnessed a federal investigation. For your own safety, you should come with me until Blackwell's gang is behind bars." As they made their way cautiously across the landscape toward Piedras Negras, Zara found herself walking beside James. The man she had known as Thomas, the man she had loved, lost, and found again in the most unexpected way. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. James glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Jenkins will arrange for a team of agents and deputy marshals. They'll raid the mine, arrest everyone involved. With my testimony and the evidence I've gathered, Blackwell will spend the rest of his life in prison." "I meant between us," Zara clarified. James sighed, running a hand through his dust-covered hair. "I don't know, Zara. What I said was true. I do love you, but my life as an agent, it's not conducive to relationships. It's dangerous, unpredictable." "So is loving a stranger," she replied, a small smile playing at her lips despite everything. "But I took that risk once already." Before he could respond, Samuel called them forward. They had reached the outskirts of town, and needed to proceed carefully in case any of Blackwell's men were watching. At the marshal's direction, they made their way to the small sheriff's office. The local lawman, a weathered man named Harding, was initially skeptical of their story, but was convinced by Jenkins's badge and the urgency of their situation. Within hours, telegraph messages had been sent, and plans for the raid were taking shape. Samuel offered his services, which Jenkins gratefully accepted after learning of his tracking skills and steady hand with a revolver. As night approached, Zara found herself sitting alone on the small porch behind the sheriff's office, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The events of the past days swirled in her mind: her exile from home, meeting Samuel, the search for Thomas, and the discovery that the man she loved was not who she had believed him to be. The sound of boots on wooden planks made her turn. James approached hesitantly, as if unsure of his welcome. "May I join you?" he asked. Zara nodded, making room on the bench beside her. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the colors deepen across the landscape. "Jenkins wants me to return to Denver after the raid," James finally said. "The counterfeiting case is bigger than just Blackwell. There are connections to operations in Colorado and possibly California." Zara absorbed this information, feeling a familiar sense of loss beginning to form. "I see. So you'll be leaving again. That's what I need to talk to you about." James turned to face her, his expression earnest. "I've been a Secret Service agent for 5 years, Zara. It's important work I believe in. But these past months, pretending to be someone I'm not, living a lie, it's taken a toll." "I imagine it would," she replied softly. "The thing is, not everything was a lie." He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. "My name, my purpose in Glenrio, those were false. But what I felt for you, what I still feel, that's the most honest thing in my life." Zara looked down at their joined hands. "How can I know that for certain? How can I trust anything about you now?" "You can't," James admitted. "Not yet. Trust has to be earned, and I've given you every reason to doubt me." He took a deep breath. "That's why I'm asking for a chance to prove myself. Not as Thomas, not as Agent Taylor, but as James, just a man who loves you and wants to build a life with you." Zara looked up sharply. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm resigning from the Secret Service. After this case is closed, I'm done. His eyes never left hers. If you'll have me, I want to start over somewhere new where we can both begin again with the truth between us. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but Zara hesitated. James, your work is important to you. I wouldn't want you to give that up because of me. I'm not, he assured her. I'm making this choice for both of us. The life of an agent doesn't allow for the things I want now: a home, a family, a future with you. Before Zara could respond, the door opened behind them. Samuel stood there, his expression grim. Jenkins needs us, he said. The men from Las Vegas have arrived. The raid on the mine is happening tonight. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Marshal Jenkins had assembled a force of 15 men, a mix of deputy marshals, Secret Service agents, and local volunteers. Samuel was assigned to guide one group to the secret entrance he, Zara, and Tim had used, while James would lead the main force to the front entrance. Zara was instructed to remain at the sheriff's office with Tim, much to her frustration. But as James prepared to leave, he took her aside for a moment of privacy. When this is over, he said, we'll have that conversation again. But I want you to know, whatever you decide, my feelings won't change. He kissed her briefly but intensely, then joined the men mounting up outside. Samuel approached her last, adjusting his borrowed gun belt. I'll make sure he comes back to you, he promised quietly. Zara was surprised by the gesture. You don't even like him. Samuel's mouth quirked in a half-smile. I'm beginning to think my initial judgment might have been hasty. Besides, I've seen how he looks at you. That's not a man who's pretending. With that, he mounted up and rode off with the others, leaving Zara and Tim to the agonizing task of waiting. The raid on the mine lasted through the night. From their position in town, Zara and Tim could occasionally hear distant gunfire, each burst causing Zara's heart to clench with fear for both James and Samuel. It was nearly dawn when the first riders returned to town. Zara rushed outside to see Marshal Jenkins dismounting, his arm bandaged but his expression triumphant. We got them, he announced. Blackwell and most of his men are in custody. We lost 2 deputies, and there are some wounded, but overall it was a success. James? Zara asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Samuel, Jenkins's face softened. Both alive. Taylor took a bullet to the shoulder, pushing one of my men out of the line of fire. Your friend Samuel is helping bring him in now. They should be here soon. True to his word, within the hour, more riders appeared. Samuel was among them, supporting a pale but conscious James. Zara rushed forward as they helped James dismount, relief washing over her at the sight of him alive, despite his obvious pain. The local doctor was summoned to treat the wounded, and for the next several hours, the small sheriff's office served as an impromptu hospital. Zara assisted where she could, bringing water, holding lamps, and providing whatever comfort was possible to the injured men. By midday, James's wound had been cleaned and dressed. The bullet had passed through his shoulder without hitting bone, and the doctor declared him lucky. He was resting on a cot in a small back room when Zara finally had a moment to sit with him. You promised me a conversation, she reminded him, taking a seat beside his cot. James smiled weakly. I did, didn't I? Though I imagined being a bit more heroic and a lot less shot when we had it. Zara couldn't help but smile in return. I think pushing a man out of the line of fire counts as heroic. Jenkins told you about that. He's exaggerating. I just stumbled and knocked him over. That's not how he tells it. James reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injury. Have you thought about what I said? About starting over, Zara nodded slowly. I have, And I have questions, many questions about who you really are and what kind of future we might have. Ask me anything, he offered. No more secrets. Not now, she said, glancing at his bandaged shoulder. You need to rest. But when you're stronger, we'll have that talk. All of it, the truth, the possibilities, everything. James squeezed her hand. I can live with that. His eyes began to drift closed, the exhaustion and pain medication taking effect. Just don't disappear on me, Zara Whitfield. I won't, she promised, watching as he slipped into sleep. Outside the room, she found Samuel sitting alone, cleaning his revolver with methodical precision. How is he? Samuel asked without looking up. Resting. The doctor says he'll recover fully with time. Zara sat across from him. Thank you for bringing him back safely. Samuel nodded, continuing his work on the gun. He fought well. Saved Jenkins's life, probably. That counts for something in my book. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments before Zara spoke again. What will you do now, Samuel? Return to tracking people for the marshal. He finally looked up, his expression thoughtful. Not sure. Jenkins offered me a more permanent position, said he could use a man with my skills. Might be nice to have steady work for a change. You'd be good at it. Samuel smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his weathered face. Maybe. What about you? Will you go with him with James? The question was direct but not judgmental. Zara appreciated his straightforwardness. I don't know yet, she admitted. There's still so much to learn about the real James Taylor, and I need to decide if I can trust him again, if I can trust myself to make a wiser choice this time. If it helps, Samuel offered. I watched him closely during the raid. A man shows his true character under fire. Whatever else he might be, he's brave, loyal to his men, and he fought like a man with something to live for. He paused. A man in love. Zara felt a rush of gratitude for this unexpected ally. That does help. Thank you, Samuel, he nodded, returning to his task. Just don't rush into anything. Take your time. Make sure it's what you really want. The next 2 weeks in Piedras Negras passed slowly as the wounded recovered and arrangements were made for transporting the prisoners to Santa Fe for trial. James's resignation from the Secret Service was officially accepted, though Jenkins expressed his regret at losing such a valuable agent. During this time, Zara and James had many long conversations. He told her everything, his real background as the son of a Boston merchant who had joined the Secret Service after the war, his previous assignments, and how he had truly fallen in love with her despite his professional obligations. I never intended to hurt you, he explained as they walked slowly along the edge of town one evening, his arm still in a sling. When I realized how serious my feelings had become, I tried to find a way to tell you the truth. But by then, we were closing in on Blackwell, and any disruption could have cost months of work. So you left instead, Zara said, not accusingly but seeking understanding. I thought I was protecting you. I never imagined your father would react so harshly. You didn't know him like I did, Zara replied. Appearances and control were everything to him. My loving someone he hadn't chosen, someone he couldn't control, was unforgivable in his eyes. James stopped walking, turning to face her. Do you regret it? Loving me, even when I wasn't who you thought I was? Zara considered the question seriously. I regret the deception, the pain, the uncertainty. But love you? No, I don't regret that. Even when I thought you'd abandoned me, I couldn't bring myself to regret loving you. He reached out with his good arm, drawing her closer. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. And for a chance to prove that the man you fell in love with, the one who wrote those letters, who treasured every moment with you, that man is the real me, regardless of the name I use. Zara looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception and finding only sincerity and hope. "I believe you," she said softly, "and I'm willing to try. But slowly, James. We need to build something real this time." His smile was radiant. "We have all the time in the world." As the day approached for the prisoners to be transferred to Santa Fe, Marshal Jenkins called Zara, James, Samuel, and Tim together to discuss their futures. "The trial won't be for several months," he explained. "We'll need all of you to testify, especially you, Taylor. But in the meantime, you're free to go where you please, provided you leave contact information." "What about the boy?" Samuel asked, nodding toward Tim, who had become something of a mascot among the lawmen. Jenkins scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Well, he has no family to speak of, and he's been a considerable help. I've been thinking about that." To everyone's surprise, Samuel spoke up. "If the boy's willing, I'd like to take him on. I've been offered a deputy marshal position in the Arizona Territory." A growing boy could do worse than learn a trade with the law. Tim's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You'd take me with you?" Samuel's expression remained serious, but his eyes held unexpected warmth. "It won't be easy. You'll have chores, schooling when we can arrange it, and you'll have to mind what I say. But yes, if you want to come, there's a place for you." The boy's enthusiastic acceptance brought rare smiles to everyone's faces. It seemed that amid all the danger and deception, something good had taken root. Later that evening, as preparations were being made for departures the following day, James found Zara packing her few belongings in the small room she'd been given at the boarding house. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "about where we might go to start our new life." Zara looked up from her packing. "And how do you feel about California? I have a cousin in San Francisco who owns a shipping business. He's offered me a position many times over the years." "San Francisco," Zara repeated, testing the name. "It's very far from everything I've known." "That's partly the point," James admitted. "A fresh start, away from the memories and complications of the past. But if it's too far—" Zara shook her head. "No, I think distance might be exactly what we need. A place where no one knows us, where we can build something together without shadows hanging over us." James crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Does that mean you'll come with me?" "Yes," Zara said, surprising herself with the certainty she felt. "Yes, I'll go to California with you." The joy in his face was answer enough to any lingering doubts she might have had. This was not the life she had imagined for herself growing up as Judge Whitfield's protected daughter. But perhaps it would be something better, something chosen rather than dictated, built on truth rather than expectations. The next morning, farewells were exchanged on the dusty main street of Piedras Negras. Marshal Jenkins and his deputies were escorting the prisoners to Santa Fe, while Samuel and Tim were headed west to Arizona. James had secured passage for himself and Zara on a westbound stage that would eventually connect them to the railroad, beginning their journey to California. As Samuel prepared to depart, he approached Zara one last time. "I want to thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For trusting me that first night outside Glenrio. It can't have been easy to ride off with a stranger." Zara smiled. "You weren't a stranger for long. And I've learned that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones we understand least, while strangers can become the truest friends." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Take care of yourself, Zara Whitfield, and make him earn your trust every day." "I will," she promised. "And you take care of that boy. He needs someone steady in his life." With a tip of his hat, Samuel mounted his horse. Tim, sitting proudly on a small pony that Jenkins had helped procure, waved enthusiastically as they rode off toward the western horizon. As their stage prepared to depart, James took Zara's hand, his expression serious. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind." Zara looked at him, at the man she had loved as Thomas, lost to heartbreak, and found again as James. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she felt a certainty that had eluded her since the day her father had cast her out. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied. "My father cast me out for loving a stranger. If that stranger turns out to be the man I spend my life with, then perhaps it was worth the cost." James squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with emotion. "I'll make it worth it, Zara. I promise." As the stage pulled away from Piedras Negras, Zara looked back at the small settlement that had witnessed so much change in her life. The abandoned silver mine was visible in the distance, its weathered structures a reminder of deception and danger, but also of truth revealed and courage found. She didn't know what awaited them in California, but for the first time since reading that blood-soaked letter outside her father's house, Zara Whitfield felt the weight of uncertainty lifting from her shoulders. The future was unwritten, but it would be theirs to shape together, no longer strangers, but partners in whatever lay ahead. The journey to San Francisco was long and arduous, taking them across deserts, mountains, and finally, to the blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. They arrived in the bustling city in late autumn of 1875, when the fog rolled in daily from the bay and the hills were alive with activity. James's cousin, Samuel Everton, welcomed them warmly, offering temporary lodging in his spacious home on Nob Hill while James learned the shipping business. Zara found herself adapting to city life more easily than she had expected, fascinated by the diversity and energy of San Francisco. By spring of 1876, they had established themselves in a modest but comfortable home near Telegraph Hill, with views of the bay that still took Zara's breath away. James proved adept at his new profession, his years of observational skills and attention to detail serving him well in managing shipping contracts and negotiations. They were married on a clear day in April, with Nathaniel serving as James's best man and his wife, Eleanor, standing up for Zara. It was a small ceremony, but filled with genuine happiness and promise for the future. In the years that followed, their lives blossomed in ways neither could have imagined during those dangerous days in the silver mine. James eventually became a partner in Nathaniel's shipping firm, while Zara discovered a talent for writing and began contributing articles to local newspapers about the changing West. They maintained correspondence with Samuel, who had settled into his role as deputy marshal with unexpected contentment. Tim, now Samuel's legally adopted son, was excelling in school and already expressing interest in following his father's path in law enforcement. Marshal Jenkins visited them once, when a counterfeiting case brought him to San Francisco in 1878. Over dinner, he informed them that Judge Whitfield had died the previous winter, leaving his estate in disarray due to poor investments and mounting debts. "He never mentioned you in his will," Jenkins told Zara gently, "but he did keep every newspaper article you've published. His housekeeper found them in a locked drawer of his desk." The news brought a complicated mix of emotions for Zara: grief for what might have been, regret for her father's inability to accept her choices, but also a certain peace in knowing that perhaps, in his way, he had eventually recognized her worth. In the summer of 1880, their family expanded with the birth of their son, whom they named Samuel Nathaniel Taylor. 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth joined the family, completing their happiness. On a warm evening in 1885, a decade after their fateful meeting outside Glenrio, James and Zara sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the garden below. The years had been kind to them. Both James's hair showed touches of silver at the temples, while Zara's beauty had matured into something more serene and confident. "You ever regret it?" James asked suddenly, echoing a question from long ago. Leaving everything behind for a life you never planned. Zara reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. How could I regret the journey that brought us here? Every step, even the painful ones, led us to this moment. James raised her hand to his lips. When I left those letters for you in Glenrio, I never imagined where they would lead. I was playing a role, doing my duty. I didn't expect to find my heart in the process. And I never expected to find freedom in being cast out, Zara replied. But that's what happened. My father thought he was punishing me, but he was actually setting me free to find a life of my own choosing. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and crimson, much like the desert sunsets of New Mexico. I received a letter from Samuel today, James mentioned. Tim has been accepted to law school in Denver. Samuel couldn't be prouder. Zara smiled at the news. From orphaned boy to lawyer, quite a journey. Samuel has been good for him. Just as you've been good for me, James said softly. You taught me that a life of purpose doesn't have to be a life alone, that there's more courage in loving openly than in hiding behind duty and caution. And you taught me that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when everything we thought we knew falls away. Zara leaned against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that their story, unlikely and complicated as it had been, had found its proper path. As twilight deepened into night and their children were called in for bedtime, James and Zara remained on the porch, wrapped in the warmth of their shared history and the promise of days still to come. The young woman cast out for loving a stranger, and the agent who had found his true self in the midst of deception had built something neither could have foreseen: a life of honesty, purpose, and abiding love. And as the first stars appeared above San Francisco Bay, Zara thought back to that blood-soaked letter and the cowboy who had appeared in her darkest hour. She couldn't help but smile at the words Samuel had spoken that night in the Cottonwood Grove. Then I'm glad to be him. In the end, the stranger she had loved had become the man she knew better than anyone in the world: a partner, a husband, a father to their children. And still, after all these years, the great adventure of her life.